This isn't just some story I made up for clicks. It's something that actually happened to me. It's a memory I've replayed 1,000 times, and even now, it feels as sharp and painful as the day it began. The air in the vault was cold, sterile, smelling faintly of archival paper and my husband's expensive, smug cologne. I stood before the empty mahogany shelves, the custom-built, climate-controlled room that was once the beating heart of his world, and ran my fingers over the smooth, dust-free wood. This was where he had kept them all, his collection, his real love, each piece encased in hard plastic, preserved and worshipped. In the center of the room, on a single black pedestal where a signed 1934 Babe Ruth baseball used to sit, was the only thing I'd left behind. A half-empty bottle of bourbon and a single glass, a silent testament to the night he finally taught me what our marriage was worth. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. Our 10th anniversary started with a promise. A decade. It felt monumental, a lifetime woven together with inside jokes, shared dreams, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone's rhythm as well as your own. Or so I thought. We lived in a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park, Chicago, the kind of place with old bones and modern guts, a home we'd painstakingly renovated together. Mark was a senior partner at a downtown finance firm, a shark in a bespoke suit, and I was a freelance graphic designer with a roster of clients that kept me busy and creatively fulfilled. We were, by all outside accounts, the perfect couple. Successful, attractive, living the polished urban dream. But a painting, no matter how beautiful, can hide 1,000 cracks in the canvas. I had spent 2 weeks planning the evening. A private chef was coming to recreate the meal from our first date at a tiny Italian place in Little Italy that had long since closed down. Cacio e pepe, branzino with lemon and herbs, and a bottle of the same Brunello we'd splurged on when we were young and pretending to be richer than we were. I bought a new dress, a slip of emerald silk that brought out the green in my eyes and made me feel like the woman he'd first fallen in love with. I wanted to remind him of us, the real us, before his collection became the third, and then primary, person in our marriage. His collection. It started with a single signed baseball he'd inherited from his grandfather. A harmless hobby, I'd thought. Quaint, even. But over the years, it had metastasized. It grew from one ball to a pantheon of sports memorabilia, a museum of heroes captured in leather, cardboard, and ink. It consumed our spare room, which he'd had professionally converted into a climate-controlled vault with museum-grade lighting and fingerprint access. It consumed his weekends spent at auctions and conventions. And slowly, insidiously, it began to consume our money. "It's an investment, Elena," he'd say, his voice laced with that patronizing tone he reserved for topics he believed were beyond my comprehension. "This isn't spending, it's asset allocation. This collection is worth more than our 401k. He was supposed to be home by 6. At 6:15, I smoothed down my silk dress for the 10th time and checked on the chef, who was humming quietly in our kitchen, the fragrant smell of garlic and rosemary filling the house. At 6:45, my smile felt brittle. I sent him a text. "Everything okay? Chef is here, and the Brunello is waiting." No reply. At 7:30, the chef was plating the first course, and my heart had sunk into the pit of my stomach. The silence from my phone was a roar. Finally, at 8:02, a text message blinked onto my screen. Not a call. A text. "Poker night. Games running deep. Don't wait up." That was it. No apology. No mention of the anniversary. Not even a hint of recognition. Just a cold, dismissive sign-off, as if I were a roommate he was informing of a minor schedule change. I stared at the message, the words blurring through the hot tears that sprang to my eyes. The chef, a kind man with a gentle face, saw my expression and knew. "Ma'am," he said softly, "should I pack this up?" I nodded, unable to speak. He quietly packed away the beautiful meal, the branzino that would never be eaten, the pasta that would never be savored. He left the house with a sympathetic look that felt more humiliating than the silence itself. I stood alone in our perfectly decorated home, in my perfect dress, surrounded by the ghost of a perfect evening. I blew out the candles, the smoke curling into the air like a dying prayer. I walked upstairs, not to our bedroom, but to the vault. I pressed my thumb to the scanner, and the heavy door hissed open. There it all was, lined up in neat, obsessive rows. The Jordan rookie card, the signed Ollie boxing glove, the 34 Ruth ball on its stupid little pedestal. These were his gods. This was his church. And I finally understood. I wasn't just forgotten. I was replaced. He hadn't forgotten our anniversary. It just hadn't been important enough to remember in the first place. The poker game wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A preference. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, coiling shame in my gut. I looked at the collection, the assets, and a cold, quiet thought bloomed in the ruins of my heart. You love this more than you love me. Let's see how much it's really worth. The next morning, Mark strolled in looking rumpled and smelling of stale cigar smoke and victory. He dropped his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, the clatter echoing the hollow space in my chest. He saw me sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. "Morning," he said, breezing past me to the fridge. He pulled out a bottle of electrolyte water. "Man, what a night. Clean taught out." He had pocket aces. I had a straight flush on the river. You should have seen his face. I just stared at him. My voice was dangerously calm when I finally spoke. "You missed our anniversary." He paused, the bottle halfway to his lips. A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed his face before being replaced by a mask of performative regret. "Oh God. Elena. I am so sorry. It completely slipped my mind. The guys, you know how it is, the game got intense. I had a chef here, Mark. I had a dinner planned." I know, and I'm an idiot," he said, coming over and trying to wrap his arms around me. I flinched away. "Hey, come on. Don't be like that. We'll celebrate this weekend. My treat. We'll go to Gibson's, get a huge steak. It'll be great. Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse on Rush Street." That was his solution for everything. A slab of overpriced meat to paper over any crack, any hurt. It was a business dinner destination, not a place for mending a broken heart. The thoughtlessness of it was another small cut. "I don't want to go to Gibson's," I said, my voice flat. He sighed, the martyr. "Okay, fine. Where do you want to go? You name it. Money's no object. I did really well last night." He grinned, as if that would fix it. As if his winnings could patch the gaping hole he'd torn in the last 10 years. "It wasn't about the money," I whispered. "Elena, don't be dramatic. It was one night. A date. We have thousands of nights ahead of us. You know I've been stressed at work, and poker is my one release. You can't begrudge me that." The gaslighting was so practiced, so smooth. I was being dramatic. My feelings were an inconvenience, an overreaction to a simple mistake. He disappeared into the shower, and a few minutes later, reappeared in his work suit, looking fresh and powerful, the night's transgressions washed away. He placed a small, horribly cheap-looking gift box on the counter. It was from a Walgreens bag. "Here," he said a little too brightly. "Happy anniversary." I opened it. Inside was a silver-plated necklace with a tacky, cubic zirconia heart. The kind of thing you buy from a rotating display next to the checkout counter. A guilt gift. A thoughtless, meaningless gesture to shut me up. I looked from the cheap necklace to his face, his handsome, smiling, utterly vacant face, and I felt nothing. The love, the anger, the hurt, it had all been cauterized, leaving behind a hard, clear certainty. He was my husband in name only. His heart, his passion, his devotion, it all lived in that cold, dark room upstairs. In the weeks that followed, a chilling clarity settled over me. The incident wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom of a disease that had been rotting our marriage from the inside out for years. I started watching him, not as a wife, but as a detective investigating a crime scene. I paid attention to the way his eyes lit up when he talked about a potential acquisition for his collection, a dull, glassy sheen compared to the distracted haze he wore when I spoke about my day. I noticed how he'd lower his voice and walk into another room to take calls from auction houses, the way a man might hide an affair. His power was absolute because it was so casual. He controlled our finances, funneling what I now suspected were huge sums of our joint savings into his investments, without a second thought. Our money was his money. My money was also his money. When I tried to talk about taking a real vacation, a trip to Greece I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl, he'd waved it off. Elena, a trip like that is just lighting money on fire. The memories fade. A 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan rookie card, PSA 10 gem mint? That appreciates. That's our future. It's smarter. He made me feel small, frivolous, and financially illiterate. His friends, a pack of backslapping sycophants who orbited him at the poker table, reinforced this narrative. Todd, Kevin, and Brian. They were all cut from the same cloth. Men who measured their worth in stock portfolios and prized possessions. When they came over, they'd all make a pilgrimage to the vault, speaking in hushed, reverent tones, clapping Mark on the back. "You're a genius, Mark," Todd would say, staring at a signed jersey. "Your wife must be thrilled to be married to such a savvy investor." They'd look at me, expecting me to nod along, the docile, supportive wife, proud of her husband's big, important hobby. I learned to smile and say nothing, the bitterness a metallic taste on my tongue. He had created a world where his obsession was lauded as genius, and my desires were dismissed as childish whims. He seemed utterly untouchable in his fortress of smug self-assurance. The real discovery, the one that broke the last fragile thread holding me in place, came on a Tuesday night. Mark was out, schmoozing a client at some steakhouse downtown. I couldn't sleep. I found myself wandering into his home office, a space I rarely entered. His laptop was open on his desk, asleep. On an impulse I still can't explain, I touched the trackpad. It woke without a password prompt. He was that arrogant. An Excel spreadsheet was open on the screen, its title a punch to the gut, Assets_Master. My hands trembled as I scrolled through it. It wasn't just a list, it was a Bible. Every single item in his collection, cataloged with obsessive detail. Item description, purchase date, purchase price, grading certification, and current estimated market value. I scrolled to the bottom of the current value column and hit the sum function. The number that appeared on the screen made the air leave my lungs. It was astronomical. 7 figures. A life-changing amount of money that he had been hoarding in that cold room, lecturing me about the cost of a plane ticket to Santorini. But that wasn't the worst part. I minimized the spreadsheet and saw a folder on his desktop labeled WSOP_Vegas. My blood ran cold. I clicked it. It was full of emails between him, Todd, and the rest of his poker buddies. They were planning a trip for an upcoming tournament. Flights, hotel suites at the Bellagio, tournament buy-ins that cost more than my car. And then I saw the email chain about me. From Todd. "Elena still pissed about the anniversary thing?" Mark's reply. "Dude, you have no idea. Walking on eggshells over here. She wanted to have some big talk about it last night. I swear it's like living with a ticking time bomb of emotions. She needs to get a real hobby." Kevin chimed in. "Just show her the spreadsheet, man. Tell her she's married to a goddamn visionary. If my wife gave me grief, I'd tell her to go cry into her pile of shoes." The final email was from Mark. It was the kill shot. "Nah, better to let her think she has a point. Keep her happy enough so she doesn't look too closely at the Amex bill this month, lol. The 72 Clemente rookie card I've been hunting just came up for auction. Gotta have it. It's a better long-term bet than marriage counseling, that's for sure. A better long-term bet than marriage counseling." I closed the laptop, my movements slow and deliberate. The heat of my initial rage had cooled into something far more dangerous. Ice. The humiliation of the forgotten anniversary, the cheap necklace, the casual dismissal. It all paled in comparison to this. This was a calculated, sustained campaign of disrespect. He wasn't just neglectful. He was contemptuous. He and his friends saw me as a joke, an emotional obstacle to be managed while they pursued their real passions. I stood in the silent office, the glow of the city lights painting stripes on the floor, and I felt a profound shift inside me. The part of me that had been fighting for our marriage, the part that had been making excuses for him, simply died. It withered and turned to ash. And in its place, a single crystalline thought took root. He thought his collection was an investment. Fine. It was time for me to liquidate the asset. I walked out of his office, not as Elena, the wounded wife, but as a CEO planning a hostile takeover of her own life. The decision once made was terrifying and exhilarating. For a decade, my life had been in orbit around Mark's sun. Now I was plotting a course into a new galaxy, one where I was the center. The first step was information. I became a spy in my own home. I used my design skills to my advantage, taking high-resolution, perfectly lit photographs of every single item in the vault. I documented serial numbers, grading certificates, and letters of authenticity. I created my own version of his spreadsheet, but mine had a different purpose. It wasn't a list of assets, it was a catalog for liquidation. Next, I needed an expert, someone who could navigate the opaque world of high-end memorabilia. I spent days scouring the internet for the most reputable and, more importantly, the most discreet appraisers and auctioneers in the country. I found him through a niche forum for private collectors, a man named Arthur Vance, based in Chicago but with connections worldwide. His website was understated, his client testimonials glowing with praise for his professionalism and his ability to handle sensitive estate and divorce-related acquisitions. He was perfect. I created a new anonymous email address and sent him a carefully worded inquiry, attaching a few of the less recognizable, mid-tier items from my photo catalog as a sample. His reply came within hours. It was concise and professional. He was intrigued by the quality of the items and was available for a consultation. We arranged a phone call. I took the call from my car, parked in a far corner of the Lincoln Park Zoo parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mr. Vance," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am representing the owner of a significant private collection. The owner is looking to divest completely and quickly. Discretion is the absolute top priority." "I understand completely, Ms. Black," he said, using the alias I'd given him. "My business is built on discretion. Based on the photos you sent, this appears to be a serious collection. May I ask about the circumstances of the sale?" I paused, choosing my words. "The owner has had a fundamental shift in investment strategy." There was a knowing silence on the other end of the line. "I see. These shifts are not uncommon. If the entire collection is of this caliber, a private treaty sale to a consortium of my top clients would likely yield the highest and fastest return. It would be far more discreet than a public auction." We spoke for an hour. He explained his commission structure, the logistics of appraisal and transport, the legalities of transfer of ownership. I felt a surge of power. I was no longer the emotional wife who didn't understand finance. I was orchestrating a multi-million-dollar transaction. Mark had always treated me like a child when it came to money, but I had listened over the years. I had absorbed more than he ever realized. The final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap a week later. Mark came home beaming, radiating a smug energy that set my teeth on edge. "Pack your bags for one, baby," he announced, throwing a glossy travel brochure onto the kitchen counter. It was for a spa resort in Arizona. "While I'm in Vegas for the World Series of Poker next month, I'm sending you on an all-expenses-paid trip. Get your massages, your facials, whatever you want. My treat." I looked at him, at his magnanimous gesture, and I almost laughed. It was so transparent. He wasn't giving me a gift, he was getting me out of the way. He wanted a guilt-free trip to Vegas with his boys, and this was the price. He was paying for my silence, for my compliance. "Wow, Mark," I said, forcing a bright, grateful smile. "That's so thoughtful." "See, I told you we'd celebrate," he said, puffing out his chest, proud of his own genius. "It's a 5-day trip. You'll love it." 5 days. It was the perfect window. An entire work week where he would be 3 time zones away, blissfully ignorant, blinded by the neon lights of Las Vegas and his own colossal ego. I picked up the brochure. "It looks wonderful," I said, my voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Thank you." He had no idea he had just funded and scheduled the demolition of his own empire. The war had begun, and he had just handed me the battle plans. The morning Mark left for Vegas was a masterclass in deception. I played the part of the dutiful wife perfectly. I made him coffee, steamed his favorite travel shirt, and listened with feigned interest as he strategized about his opening poker hands. He was giddy, like a kid on his way to summer camp. "You have a great time in Arizona, okay?" he said, kissing me at the door. It was a quick, dry peck on the cheek, his mind already on the plane. "Don't spend too much," he added with a wink, a final, ironic twist of the knife. "I won't," I said, my smile feeling like a mask. "You just focus on your game. Bring home a trophy." The moment his Uber turned the corner, my entire demeanor shifted. The mask fell away, replaced by the cool efficiency of a field general. I made 3 calls. The first was to the airline, canceling my flight to Arizona. The second was to a lawyer specializing in Illinois divorce and asset law, to schedule an urgent consultation. The third was to Arthur Vance. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice clear and firm. "It's Ms. Black. The asset is available for immediate acquisition. We have a 5-day window." "Excellent," his calm voice replied. "My team is on standby. We can be at your location in 2 hours." Those 2 hours were the most surreal of my life. I walked through my house, which suddenly felt like a temporary holding cell. I looked at the photos on the mantelpiece, of our wedding, of trips we'd taken, of a life that was now nothing more than a collection of well-staged lies. I felt a pang of something, not sadness, but a strange, hollow nostalgia for the woman who had believed in those pictures. She was gone. I was her executor. Arthur's team was a silent, efficient crew of 3 men in discreet, dark blue uniforms. They arrived not in a massive moving truck, but in an unmarked, climate-controlled cargo van. They were professional art handlers equipped with white gloves, custom-built crates, and a quiet reverence for the objects they were transporting. Arthur supervised, his keen eyes missing nothing. He moved through the vault, cross-referencing items with the digital catalog I had sent him. "The provenance on this Gehrig bat is impeccable," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "And the condition of the 52 mantle, remarkable." I watched them work, a detached observer to the dismantling of my husband's soul. Each item they carefully packed and removed was a brick being pulled from the foundation of his identity. He wasn't Mark, the husband, or Mark, the finance guy. He was Mark, the collector. Without his collection, who was he? It was a question I was eager for him to answer. Within 4 hours, the vault was empty. The mahogany shelves were bare, the museum lighting illuminating nothing but dust motes dancing in the air. It was a hollowed-out carcass. The team loaded the last crate, and Arthur presented me with a detailed inventory and a contract for the private sale, which he assured me would be finalized within 48 hours. "The funds minus my commission will be wired to the account of your choosing," he said, handing me a pen. "It has been a pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Black." I signed the papers. My hand didn't shake. I felt a profound, unnerving calm. The lawyer I met with that afternoon was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Cassandra. I explained the situation, omitting the more dramatic details and framing it as a preemptive move to protect my share of marital assets from a financially reckless spouse. "Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state," she explained, peering at me over her glasses. "Equitable doesn't always mean 50-50ths. His argument will be that you sold a shared marital asset without his consent. Our argument will be that he was systematically converting liquid marital assets into non-liquid personal assets, effectively hiding money from the marriage. The fact that you have deposited the funds into a separate account and are here with me now, proactively seeking legal counsel, works in your favor. It looks less like theft and more like asset protection." She laid out a strategy. It would be a messy, expensive fight. But I had one thing Mark didn't: a massive war chest, funded by his own obsession. 2 days later, an email from Arthur Vance arrived. The subject line was simple: transaction complete. I opened it and saw the wire transfer confirmation. The number was even higher than his original estimate. I stared at the string of digits, the sheer, breathtaking weight of them. It was enough to start over 10 times. It was freedom quantified. I spent the next 2 days methodically preparing my exit. I packed 2 large suitcases with my clothes, my personal documents, my laptop, and a few sentimental items that were truly mine. My grandmother's jewelry, a box of old letters, a few favorite books. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the life we had built, I left behind. It was all just stuff. It meant nothing. On the final day, I booked a one-way first-class ticket to Athens, Greece. The click of the confirm purchase button was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. My final act was to return to the vault. It was still empty, cold, and silent. I placed the half-empty bottle of Blanton's, Mark's favorite celebratory bourbon, and a single crystal tumbler on the central pedestal where his most prized possession had once sat. Then I wrote the note. My hands were steady. The words came easily. "Mark," it began. "You always said the collection was a better investment than our marriage. I decided to follow your advice and cash out our assets. By my calculation, this is my equitable share. You forgot our 10th anniversary, so I planned my own celebration. I hope you had fun in Vegas. I'm in Greece. Don't look for me. Elena." I paused, then added a postscript. The final, perfect little twist of the knife. P.S. I was going to leave you the 52 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card, but then I remembered you sold the real one last year to fund your buy-in at that underground game. What a shame. I guess this empty room is a more fitting monument to what's left of our marriage anyway. I folded the note and placed it beside the glass. I took one last look around, not at the empty shelves, but at the ghost of the woman I used to be, the one who had waited for her husband to come home, the one who had cried over a cheap necklace. I was leaving her behind, too. I walked out, pressed my thumb to the scanner one last time to lock the door, and walked out of the house without looking back. My new life was waiting. The flight to Athens was a decompression chamber. As the plane climbed over the Chicago skyline, leaving the city a glittering grid below, I felt the last 10 years slew off me like a heavy coat. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I ordered champagne and watched the curvature of the earth appear outside my window. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like an open sky instead of a gilded cage. Greece was everything I had dreamed of and more. It was ancient and rugged, and saturated with a light so pure it felt holy. I spent the first few days in Athens, wandering through the Plaka, climbing the Acropolis to stand in the shadow of the Parthenon. I ate salty olives and fresh feta, drank crisp, cold white wine, and spoke to no one. The city was a balm, its chaotic energy a welcome distraction. I imagined Mark coming home. I imagined the moment he would walk to the vault, expecting his customary moment of worship. I pictured his confusion turning to disbelief, then to panic, then to pure, apoplectic rage. I imagined him finding the note, his face contorting as he read my words. I imagined him calling his lawyer, his friends, his voice cracking with a fury he couldn't contain. And I imagined the moment his lawyer would explain the legal nightmare he was in. He had been so sure of his own cleverness, his own power. The beauty of the revenge wasn't just in taking the money. It was in using his own logic, his own transactional view of the world, against him. He had taught me the language of assets and liabilities, of investments and returns. I had simply become a better student than he ever anticipated. From Athens, I took a ferry to Santorini. As the boat pulled into the caldera, the white villages clinging to the volcanic cliffs like snow, I gasped. It was more beautiful than any picture. I had rented a small villa in Oia, with a private terrace that overlooked the Aegean Sea. The water was a shade of blue, so intense it seemed to vibrate. This was what he had called lighting money on fire. He was so wrong. This wasn't an expense. It was an investment in my own soul. On what would have been the evening of his return from Vegas, I sat on my terrace. A bottle of local wine was chilling in a bucket of ice beside me. My phone, a new Greek number, was silent. My old phone was at the bottom of the Saronic Gulf. I knew the storm would be breaking back in Chicago. Frantic voicemails, furious texts, the sputtering rage of a king who had returned to find his kingdom gone and his throne occupied by a ghost. A notification popped up on my laptop. It was a news alert from a Chicago business journal I still followed. A small headline caught my eye. Prominent Chicago financier Mark Thorne embroiled in contentious divorce, allegations of financial misconduct. The article was vague, citing anonymous sources, but the message was clear. The story was out. His carefully curated image was beginning to crack. His professional reputation, built on an image of savvy, controlled financial genius, was now being threatened by the very assets he had prized above all else. His collection, his monument to his own ego, had become the instrument of his public humiliation. The irony was exquisite. I closed the laptop. The setting sun bled across the sky, painting the whitewashed walls of OIA in hues of pink and gold. The world-famous sunset began, and the small crowd of tourists gathered nearby applauded as the final sliver of sun dipped below the horizon. I raised my glass to them, to the sea, to the future. He had built a museum to the past, to other men's glories, and locked himself inside it. I had just bought myself a ticket to the rest of the world. He spent a decade collecting things he could put a price on, but he never realized the most valuable thing in his life was the one thing he couldn't. The end.